Hey everybody, welcome to SoundBalming. I created this show for people who want to experience a radical, life-changing journey through the sounds of my diverse guests. I hope that each sound you hear on this show will strengthen your faith, encourage your dreams, and challenge you to awaken the greatness within you.
Drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We come to drop the bomb. Drop the bomb.
This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new values, and a new experience.
LaMarr D.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever the time of the day is, it is a great time to be joining me in the bomb shelter for another exciting edition of SoundBalming. I'm your friend, Dr. LaMarr D. Yes, I am here and I am happy just to be with you. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all of the emails. Thanks for the comments. Please, we ask you to subscribe. Take some time out of your day. Hit that subscribe button. Listen to us on all types of platforms. Stop being stingy. Share me with your friends. And I want to thank, if you're following the series, I want to thank my great friend, Ed Cressy from Maine. Ed talked about addiction and overcoming addiction. And he talked about how he's fought this addiction for a very, very long time, and every day is a fight. He shared with us some amazing strategies that he uses on a daily basis to deal with that, from breathing, breath work to meditation, to mindfulness, to Reiki. Ed shared a lot of stuff with us, and just all of you, thanks for tuning in. I'm so happy that you decided to join us. For my new listeners, welcome to the bomb shelter. To my old heads, you know what time it is. I'm sure you're already getting ready. As you can see, my beautiful guest who's sitting here about to get ready for our 3 breaths. We always start our show this way because we like to clear the air, we like to clear the space, and we like to bring our vibration up, all the way up. So I want you to put your feet on the floor. If you're sitting in a chair, put your back up against the chair. If you're standing, that's okay, but just stand in a comfortable position. Put your palms on your lap with the palms facing up as if you are receiving, because we are about to give each other a gift. This is an exchange. This is an exchange from me to you, you to me. So slowly close your eyes, relax your face, relax your jaw. Everything is soft. Everything is soft. So we're going to start with our first inhalation. Inhale. We're going to hold it for 3 seconds. Exhale. 2 more times. Inhale. Hold it for 3 seconds. Exhale. This time we're going to go a little deeper. You're going to make yourself big like a puffer fish. Inhale. Hold it for 5 seconds. Exhale. Bombers, what do we call that? We call that the breath of life. And what that breath says is that you are here. Somebody didn't make it today. Somebody did not wake up, but you are here. And I'm always so grateful, want to celebrate you for joining me in the bomb shelter, celebrating that breath. So let's get this party started. Bombers, we are designed with specific gifts offered to us. You have a gift. I have a gift. I tell people you can't do what I do and I can't do what you do, but what is given to us is given to us. But unfortunately, none of us come with, we don't get manuals to really help us with our gift. So quite often, many of us are trying to figure out how to use our gifts. For those of us who want to make a difference, our lives become an epic quest to know, to honor, and claim our particular way of belonging to this world. But for empaths, the learning curve can somehow be very, very steep. Empaths are exquisitely sensitive, and their highly refined nervous systems are designed to be able to have powerful energies such as love, gratitude, compassion, and fierce grace. You hear what I said? fierce grace. But unfortunately, they rarely get the opportunity to themselves because most of the time, empaths are bogged down by personal opportunity to be themselves, because most of the time, empaths are they're just collecting pain from other people. Empaths have a hard time distinguishing between what is theirs and what isn't. They tend to carry other suffering, feel overwhelmed, have difficulty in relationships and in groups, associate or disassociate from their bodies, and isolate or numb to manage their pain. This can make life very, very challenging. You guys know I talk about this on the show. I have a daughter who's an empath, and I love her. She's teaching me how to love, and she's teaching me how to look at the world. But sometimes boundaries are an essential first step for empaths. But many empaths mistake walls for boundaries, staying stuck in a loop of protection and running fear-based neural patterns that actually increase their suffering. So if you're an empath, or if you know someone who is an empath, or if you don't know what the hell an empath is, I want to make sure you come close to the speaker, because I'm inviting my next guest in. You're looking at her, Jennifer Moore, who's going to tell us about her gifts and mastering her gifts. She's a mentor, teacher for sensitive, intuitive women who need help controlling their emphatic overwhelm, what keeps them stuck in their life and in business. She brings over 35 years, that's 3 and 5, 35 of experience to her practice as an energy healer, a spiritual guide. With her 5-step system, Jennifer helps empaths release the stress, tune into their real truth, and use their gifts, you hear that, to make a difference. In addition to being the author of the Amazon bestseller, yes, I said the Amazon bestseller, who's with us today, to a step-by-step guide. You know, there's a 5 step-by-step guide to go from an emotional hot mess. This is the first time I had a person who's a hot mess is going to claim that they're a hot mess, but she's going to tell you how she overcame of being a hot mess. As a former hot mess and world-class authorizer, Jennifer has had to learn to pull herself together to develop this emotional soup to heal from her past. But you know what's cool? Jennifer is joining us right now in the bomb shelter, and I'm so honored. Jennifer, let our listeners know where you are calling in from.
So I am calling in from horse country, just about 30 minutes north of Portland, Maine.
Okay.
So the other Portland, yeah.
A whole bunch of maniacs in Maine, right? You know that.
Yes, right, definitely. Right. A bunch of maniacs. And so those of us who are the wannabes.
Wannabe. Well, Jennifer, I love your energy already, your background.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, everything is glowing. Let us know how you're doing since this pandemic. I always like to check in with my guests to make sure that they're good, because we're such givers, but a lot of times people never ask us how we're doing. So I want to do a check-in. How are you doing?
I am on a daily basis surrendering to divine source. Okay. And continuing to remember that all is well right in this very moment. And what I will say is that as a highly sensitive empathic person, I've been experiencing waves of impact from what's been coming in the world right now. And there have been a few times, generally anywhere between 7 to 10 days prior to something coming, where I can it's almost like if I was a creature standing in a forest, I would be able to feel the rumble underneath my feet of sort of the tremors of the earthquake that was coming. And the most recent experience was just before Beirut. I could sense something was coming. And I imagine that some of your listeners probably have had this experience too, where the weirdest thing is that it's almost a relief when the horrible thing happens, because it's like a pressure cooker where finally the pressure has been released. And it's like, oh, that's what I've been picking up on. So overall, my life is beyond blessed. I am so blessed. I am so fortunate. I am so grateful. And I am also really aware of the fact that we are going through one of the most powerful, transformative times on this planet that I think we've been through possibly ever. So, yeah.
Yes. Well, welcome, and I'm so glad that I'm loving. I'm thinking this gospel song that's in my head says "bless, bless." Like I'm just hearing it as soon as you said it, because your energy. I'm just watching you just light up and light up.
Yeah.
So my engineer, not my engineer, my producer sends me so much stuff about all the people that come onto the show, and she was so excited about bringing you on. But before we get into all the great things that you've done, all the clients that you work with, I want to go back to little Jennifer. I want you to share with us. When did you first know that you were an empath? So my daughter is 16 years old. And I interviewed Alexandra. I can't think of Alexandra's last name. She's a person that was on the show. And I asked her a very similar question. And I watched this movie. I can't think of the name of the movie, but it's a movie where this woman discovered that she was an empath. And so I showed this to my daughter. And Jennifer, my daughter was looking at it. And I said to her, "Is this you?" And she was like this. And I had to apologize for what her mom and I had done to her. Nothing abusive, but just, stop screaming. I know the sounds, the balloons, everything. Because again, you want your children to have a quote unquote good life, and you at the carnival and balloons are going off and firecrackers are going off, and you're thinking this is a time to celebrate. And she didn't like any of that. Mm-hmm. And so when I showed her this movie, and for anybody that's listening to this show who has a child like that, I want you to really pay attention to Jennifer's message, just like when I had someone else on talking about it. But when did you first discover that you were an empath? And then define to us what an empath is.
Okay. Actually, can I reverse that and define empath first and then talk about when I discovered it? Awesome.
This is your time.
So, one of the things about the word empath is that my understanding is that it's the word empathy is a word that's been in the vocabulary for a really long time. The capacity to imagine what other people are thinking and feeling, and to have, beyond sympathy, that sort of inner knowing of that person's experience. But the word empath was coined back in sometime around in the 60s by the science fiction world. And it wasn't even a word in the dictionary. It was just a word that started getting used in things. And so my first exposure to the word empath was actually a Star Trek episode. And ironically, my initials are Jennifer Elizabeth Moore, so my name is Jem. Ironically, the character in the series or in the story was named Jem. And she basically, Kirk, McCoy, and Spock all got into trouble, as they're known to do. And she came over to them and put her hands on them, and the bruises went from their body to hers. She looked terribly anguished and was suffering greatly. And then, and she collapsed in a heap, and then the bruises disappeared, and Kirk, Spock, and McCoy were fine. And so that was my first exposure to the concept of being an empath. And what I would say is that empathy is a spectrum. And you have some people on one side of the spectrum where in many ways, they're so self-contained. There's really no awareness of the thoughts, feelings, energy, sensations, experiences of other people and other creatures that are going on in the world around them. And then on the other side, you have people who are so sensitive that it is almost impossible to distinguish between what's mine, what's yours, and to be able to understand it. And some people are so sensitive as empaths that they are picking up not only the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations of the energy of the people around them, but they can be picking up on the geopathic distress. They can be picking up on future events that are coming. They can be picking up on events that happened in the past. Some people are so sensitive that they are aware of people who've crossed over, spirits, ghosts, all kinds of stuff. And that sense of the spectrum, to be an empath, in my experience, is to be fully, often very immersed in the emotional soup of the world. So that's the answer to the first part of the question. And I kind of touched on the second part of the question, which was, how did I kind of discover this? And it was a gradual knowing for me. My very first experience of starting to recognize that maybe my extreme sensitivity was not just about me, but was coming from other things, happened when I was 9 years old. And my former best friend, who had moved away when I was 5, her mom had been sick. I did not know this. And so I had this day it was the most awful day in my 9-year-old life. And I was terribly upset. I was distressed. I was just feeling this just like overwhelming sense of anxiousness and grief. And at the end of the day, my mom announced that my former BFF's mother had died of breast cancer the night before. And I had had a dream that night when her mom had died, that my mom had died. And somehow I knew that there was a link. I knew that that was something. And that was the very beginning of my experience around starting to put 2 and 2 together and go, wait a second, not everybody has these experiences.
Wow. So how did you know that dream was different from any ordinary dream? I was thinking about being 9 years old, and I'm thinking about I was really into sports and collecting baseball cards, and I think I might have started liking girls at the time. I'm not sure. But how did you know that this dream was very different? And I know it was what you would consider your first prophetic dream.
Yeah. It was definitely my first prophetic dream. In my experience with prophetic dreams, the thing is that there's a quality to them. It's like a dream on steroids. There's something, it's brighter, it's more intense, it's almost like you're living it. And they linger in a way that I find regular dreams don't tend to linger. And so it's this quality of it's heightened, it's more intense, it almost shimmers. And in that case, then obviously, like within less than 14 hours later, I'm getting the information that this dream correlates directly with the death of my friend's mother. So,
but as a 9-year-old, how did you process that? Like, did you have the vocabulary to articulate what was going? Because I'm really into dreams, right?
Yeah.
Of course, at 9, I don't think I was. I mean, my dream was probably becoming a great baseball player. So nothing as prophetic as your dreams. But as a 9-year-old, how did you process it? Did you have a very extensive vocabulary to articulate? And then who did you articulate? Because I'm like, you need to be my friend at 9 years old. I could have paid you to break my dreams down.
Yeah, well, and I was definitely, I would say a little past 9, but I was definitely one of those kids that the other kids would come to for hey, can you help me figure this out?
So instead of having a lemonade stand, you were like at 9 years old, drop a dime in here and I'll tell you if.
Exactly. Yeah, the doctor is in. And Yeah. I had kids called me old lady because I had such a vocabulary even as a little girl. And I was a weird little kid. I was an artist and I was.
This show is made up of weirdos.
Okay. So
and the guy before you, he said I was a weird kid too. So I've accepted because being a weirdo now is like hot, like being a nerd, being a weirdo, like that is a hot thing to be right now. So welcome to the community.
Thank you. Yeah, at that point in time, it was so hard to be strange. It was so hard to be weird. And I wanted desperately to be a cheerleader, I wanted to be a normal kid. And I just wasn't. But I was also a really bright, creative kid who had this ability to put things together. And, if you want to talk really deep end here, I believe that I came into this life with glimmers of other lifetimes. So I didn't have necessarily the veil over my eyes. And my personal theory is that the reason for this is that when I was born with 2 placentas, and my mom pretty much nearly died giving birth to me. So I kind of believe that I came in through the outdoor, that instead of having an ordinary birth experience where you kind of let go of all the stuff that you had before, I came in not releasing much of it. And I had a pretty strong sense of who I was even at 9 years old. So it was more of this knowing, it wasn't logical or rational. I just immediately knew, oh, my mother, I dream my mom dies, my friend's mom dies. This is the way that my dream symbolism works. And I will say for years and years and years after that, I have had the code is if I dream my dad dies, then a male dies. If I dream my mom dies, then a female dies. And I've had that experience a number of times.
Yeah. I was going to ask you that. You jumped about. I was going to ask you that.
Yeah.
You've already defined what an empath is now. Empath, psychic, intuitive, and medium. What is the difference, and can someone be all of the above? Because I've brought on a variety of different people onto this show, and some people, they choose one of the categories that I mentioned. So is there a difference, and can you be all of them?
You can absolutely be all of them. And I certainly have all of those qualities to varying degrees. And and the thing is that it's not fixed. It's not necessarily like it's always just going to be this way. It's in some ways, it's sort of the same way that, like, depending on where you're at, your brain might be better at doing sports one day and like working on, on your taxes the next. I think that these kinds of abilities have a tendency to kind of ebb and flow with our levels of stress, with our levels of sleep and nourishment and all kinds of things, as well as how we've been meditating and praying and staying connected to a power greater than ourselves. So I see it as that empath is the one who has the tendency to be the most immersed in the experience, and that it is a much more felt, lived experience, that it is not just I'm able to imagine what you're going through, or I'm having visions of something coming. That for an empath, it is often we are in it. And so what makes it so hard to be an empath is that more often than not, when we feel the distress, we think it's ours. And one of the greatest gifts I was ever given was working with a therapist when I was much younger, who was also a very sensitive person, who started to teach me to recognize what was mine and what was not mine, and started to and helped me to start to understand that probably at least 50, maybe even 70% of the stuff that I thought I was stressed out about and feeling was not actually mine.
What is that process like, though? How does a teacher, therapist help a person who's an empath separate their stuff from other people's stuff? Because I know quite often we do take on, like as an educator, I take on my kids' stuff as a law enforcement officer who's watched all these bodies. I've taken on as a person who works on the funeral home. They take, some people can shut it off. Some people shut it off with liquor. Some people shut it off with drugs and other things. But how does a therapist teach a person, in particular a person that was as young as you, to separate your stuff from other people's stuff?
Well, I mean, I think it's an incredible process. And I know for me that the process started by just talking about what was going on and starting to go, wait a second, I started to feel this distress after I had been talking to this person or after this experience happened. To really simplify it, what I would say is that, and within the 5 steps of empathic mastery, the first step is recognize what's mine, what's not mine. And the 2 layers to recognize are, first, we have to recognize that we're feeling distress, or that we're feeling out of sorts, or that we're feeling some kind of something going on that's just sort of different than usual. And then the second aspect of recognize is this mine? Is this yours? Is this am I taking on something that is more than me? And there are so many different ways and places that we can be picking things up from, as well as the fact that so frequently the thing that sort of adds, like, I don't know, the fly in the ointment is that when we are picking things up and taking them on, they often will trigger our own stuff. So there is an aspect to what we're sensing as empaths that is actually our own, in addition to what's coming from the world outside of us. Now, if you are in a if you're working in a funeral home or something like that, or you're a first responder, then I would be willing to bet you that the percentage of what you've absorbed versus what's gotten triggered in you is probably substantially higher. That that you're absorbing a lot more than necessarily, absorbing some and getting triggered by some.
Have you ever got to a point where you're like, God, creator, source, why me? I don't want to have to take on all of this stuff, all of these people's stuff. Have you ever gotten to that point? If so, what was some of your next steps to then confront those questions that you might have asked yourself?
So it's funny. I know a lot of people who beg to have the gift removed. And I, for whatever reason, have had a willingness to accept this. But what I will say is that there have been times where I am like, Mother, Father, God, please, this is, I cannot handle this sorrow on my own. And please, lift the burden of this world from me. What I also have come to is the the awareness that it's like the burden is not mine to carry, that it is greater than me, and that my job is to witness it and acknowledge it and offer it up to God, to offer it up to Source. And one of the sort of faces of God that I especially love for these times is Our Lady of Sorrows. That idea of the Blessed Mother as the grieving mother who witnesses the sorrow of the world, and asking that divine source to just really I see this and I offer these burdens up to you because I'm a little tiny thing and it's not my job. I personally believe that it is actually our ego that thinks that we can rescue other people, that we can fix this whole situation, and that there is a certain amount of lack of perspective. But I will also say, having just said that the reason why empaths so frequently are particularly inclined to want to try to fix things, to want to kind of rush in to rescue people, is that we feel better when other people feel better. We feel lousy when people feel lousy, and we feel better when other people feel better. And when we learn to start sitting with the discomfort, when we learn to be able to be okay about the fact that sometimes things are just hard, then what happens is that it becomes easier to acknowledge pain and hold the space for the pain with compassion and love without trying to find rush to solutions or rush to quick fixes.
So speaking of rushing to quick fixes and rushing to solutions, what are some things that are some misconceptions about being an empath, things that people may think and they really don't exist?
Wow, that is an amazing question. I'm like, what would I say? I guess what I would say is that one of the ways that I think that the misconception or the misinformation perhaps might be a better way to describe this is that so often empaths are being told, and you said this earlier about your daughter, you're overreacting, you're taking it too seriously, you're making too big a deal out of it, you're making things up, it's not that, don't worry about it, just let it go, just get over it. And so I would say that sometimes one of the ideas is that empaths are just these highly sensitive, imaginative people with as I had said, I'm a former world-class awfulizer, with a capacity to just kind of awfulize and imagine the worst case scenario, and that there's no basis in reality. There's no ground, there's nothing, it's not grounded in any truth. And I can tell you from having worked with so many other highly sensitive empathic people that it is extremely rare that there isn't something that people are picking up on and being sensitive to. And being able to own that and say, no, I know what I'm talking about, and there is a problem here, or there is distress going on. Just because you don't want to acknowledge it doesn't mean that it's not real. So I guess I'm not sure. And I will also say that because the word empath is not necessarily like, there's no like DSM-5 definition.
Yeah, I
of
was
the
thinking
empath.
about that. Yeah.
So, so the thing is, you can go online and find like 16 social media quizzes on what it means to be an empath, and different people are going to interpret it in different ways. I mean, there are some people who would just say you're an empath if you can't stand crowds. Like I've looked at some of the quizzes and I'm like, wow, that is pretty general. And so I guess I would say that I personally think that really being an empath is more than just being sensitive to crowds or being uncomfortable in groups of people. That really being an empath means really being in a place where you are taking on and absorbing, or able to absorb, the energy, the thoughts, the feelings of what's going on. Yeah.
I think that's a great definition. And you unpacked a little about authorizer, 2 titles that you have. Like I said, I've never really met a person who considered themselves a hot. People don't like to claim that. I remember doing a self-care session with a bunch of teachers, and I would give them a self-care awareness test. And then after the test was over, people would be looking at it, and Jennifer, they would just be like, look, I can't believe this. Look, I'm horrible. And I said, be careful when you compare yourself to others. I said, the reality is that we are all a hot mess. Some of us just do a better job of covering it up. I've never met a person who says that I used to be a former hot mess and an authorizer. Tell us more about what that means, and then what does this look like for you, being a hot mess and an authorizer?
So for me, being a hot mess has a lot to do with running around like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to find any source of support and also any source of relief. So it meant that I was eating a lot of sugar because that was my drug of choice. And I was also wanting anybody of the male persuasion to notice me and to give me attention and to make me feel better. Because when I was fixated on a specific human being and I was falling in love, that kind of acted as a shield where I wasn't necessarily taking on or feeling the rest of the world as easily. But what I will say for me as a hot mess is that for me, being a hot mess has to do with making choices very unconsciously and making decisions that are not in our own best interest, but are basically reacting to our distress and trying desperately to find a way through it. And I call myself a hot mess because when I look back at who I was in my late teens and early 20s, I was so unconscious of what was making me tick and why I was making the choices that I was making. I just wanted to be loved, and I was willing to throw myself under the bus in order to be loved. But I also, my picker was completely broken, and I frequently was choosing people who were emotionally unavailable and actually had really no interest in being in a relationship with me. So I was just, I was making bad choices.
I guess I was a hot mess
bad
too.
people.
I think
most of us are.
One of my teachers said to me, she said she looked at my timeline throughout my dating, all of those processes. She says, you've typically chosen women who you want to save, who have a lot of challenges. And she said, that's a part of your personality as an educator, as a speaker, but you typically choose women, and I'm not going to say drama because I don't like to use that word, but who have a lot of challenges and where you feel like that you can save them. Yeah. And I was like, wow. I mean, it just blew me away having someone else go through my timeline and sort of look at sort of where because then you start to then reflect, you start to name people like, yep, her, yeah. Oh, now it's making sense. And that's why I think it's important for people like you who, and I'm encouraging my listeners to reach out to you. We're going to talk about that later on, how to get in contact with you, but having someone else to sit down with you, to sort of look at your timeline, feel your energy, have those conversations. But one thing that you said, I know going to piss everybody off. They might have missed it. And I talk about it all the time, but I'm going to let you talk about it. I'm going to let you unpack it a little bit because I don't think they heard it. Let's talk about sugar.
Yes. Oh my God. Thank you so much.
So what's the deal with sugar? I've heard you stress that we should eliminate processed sugar. Listen, I don't want to get two things I don't really talk about with people sometimes is diet, things that we eat, and religion. I went to school down south. You would get killed or beat up. But as I've gotten older, I can fight and I can run. But I know the issue with processed sugar. So somebody's listening right now, and this is what they were saying. Jennifer, I was with you for a long time, sister. I love everything that you were saying. But when you said stop sugar, then I turned and went in a different direction. So tell him what's the deal with
Okay. Well, first off, your mileage may vary. And so it's like if it is not making your life unmanageable, then you may be able to process or handle sugar. And I cannot tell you whether that's your personal experience or not. But what I can tell you is that there is a couple different things about sugar. One is that sugar really alters our mood because it sends our blood sugar up high and then we end up having blood sugar crashes. It is an absolute, it wreaks havoc on our hormones. It wreaks havoc on our body's ability to process the blood sugar, and so we're struggling to produce insulin and deal with all of that. The other thing that it does is that it really compromises our intestinal fortitude. That when we eat a lot of carbohydrates, and I'm not just talking sugar, unfortunately carbs are part of the equation too. But when we eat, but especially processed sugar, like straight up sugar, what happens is that it feeds the bad bacteria in our gut. And so if you think of our gut as like an internal garden, you know what it's like if you've ever grown a garden, you know how easily weeds can take over. And let me tell you, my gardens are a hot mess this year. I definitely have not been doing enough weeding. But the thing is, sugar acts like fertilizer for the weeds. And what happens when we continuously consume things that feed the weeds in our gut, it causes the integrity of our gut to be compromised. And if somebody's ever, I don't know if you've ever heard the sort of the gut-brain connection, or the idea that our gut and our brain are actually made of the same kind of cellular material. So there's a direct connection, like as above, so below, between our brain and our gut. And so when we are eating foods that compromise the integrity of our gut, it cannot help but compromise the integrity, the clarity, the emotional stability of our mind and our mood. So I personally know, or discovered, that sugar was affecting my mood because when I eat it, I mean, come on, sugar's awesome. There's no denying it. It's like bliss in your mouth. It is the best thing ever. I would feel so giddy and happy and joyful and energized and just like thrilled for a period of time after I had eaten the sugar. But then about 2 to 3 hours later, I would start to crash. I would start to experience the incredible food cravings. I would start to feel the hungry horrors, but I would also start to feel really anxious, really agitated, really distressed. And as time went on, it would go from that to these feelings of this black mood where I would start to see through a glass darkly. I would start to really look at the world from the standpoint of we're going to hell in a handbasket. And I would often, so sugar consumption would often lead to awfulizing, which is the ability to imagine any situation and turn it into the most awful thing possible.
I get it. Being a teacher, watching young people on these sugar highs. I remember when my oldest daughter, started eating solid food, and we went to a homeopathic doctor. Our kids went to a traditional doctor and a homeopathic. And a homeopathic doctor, I remember their mom, she was feeding them. She said, "What did you feed him?" Said oatmeal. He said, what did you do with the oatmeal? Well, I made it and I put sugar in it. And he said, I never forget this. This was over 18 years ago. He said, "Did she ask for that?" And I was like, "No, she didn't." And he said, "Now you've created these cravings in your child to want that." And so I also had a teacher, Dr. Burgess, years ago when I was college, who worked in a drug treatment area. And then he went from a drug treatment area to then being a homeopathic lecturer and doctor. And he said it was harder to get people off of cocaine. It was harder getting people off sugar than it was to get them off cocaine, because they've had sugar their entire lives. And sugar, it's not just getting candy, but it's almost in everything. And so I can see the mood swing. Like I start to read stuff and I'm like, okay. So yeah, I'm really big on that. And I just wanted to sort of pull that up because I know it plays a role in, our mood swings and how we sort of gravitating towards that. I just wanted to sort of, and I'm like, let you talk about it. I know somebody's like, I'm with you, sister. Then all of a sudden I turned around and I went a different direction.
Like, I am not letting go of my sweet tea. Thank you very much. And the thing is, it's such an incredibly personal thing. And I guess I would just say, I also really believe you have to be sick and tired of being sick and tired in order to have the motivation to stop eating sugar, because sugar withdrawal sucks. Excuse my language.
Yes, it does.
It is not easy. It is not fun. There is, in my personal experience, there's about a 21-day period where you're going through what's called the carb flu, and where it's like the cravings are awful. I experience, when I've given it up, because I've gone through a couple periods in my life where I kind of got a little lax and backslid. And what I've noticed is that whenever I've given up sugar, it is the most, like, my mouth feels like an open sore for about a week afterwards. The impact is very strong. I also wanted to say that your comment about, just the relationship with kids, I put 2 and 2 together about the way sugar affects children. When I was only 19 and babysitting, actually, I think I was 20 at the time. It doesn't really matter. Anyway, I was babysitting for this little girl, and she and I it was right after Halloween. Yeah, I was 19. It was right after Halloween. And we would break into her Halloween candy. And she and I would eat the candy together. And I remember noticing that about 45 minutes after she'd had her candy, she would literally start wailing on me. Like, she would just start pounding on me. And I was like, oh my God, like the correlation between she was a completely mellow, chilled out, fine little kid. She has her sugar, and then she is just like insane, like just total, like hellion. And that was my first moment of recognition about how it affects us. But also, you're so right that it's this thing that we get introduced to as a treat, as something special, as this personal reward. Many of us use it for self-soothing, and so the idea of letting it go, it's like, oh my God, I'm giving up my best friend. But what I can say from personal experience is that it's not fun to give it up, but there are now, thankfully, lots of sugar alternatives or substitutes that are natural and healthy that we can use. That means that you don't have to go without sweets. You can have lovely desserts. And I have mastered, let me tell you, I've mastered like the zucchini brownie, using like swerve sweetener and stevia and things like that. And most people probably would not be able to tell that they're not eating a sugary brownie.
I believe me, I've shared so many things with people, and I try not to tell them what it is. I just say it's good for you, because as soon as you tell people, they're like, oh, this, again. But I'm like, it's just good food. Take it from there.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Sugar can be addictive, but something else that's addictive that you were connected to as well. Are tattoos. All right.
Yes.
So tattoos are addictive like sugar. Now, in your book, Empathic Mastery, which we're going to talk about how you can get a copy of that from listening to the show. In your book, you mentioned that you ran a successful tattoo business. So you go from the addiction to sugar to another addiction of tattoo business for nearly 20 years. So as an empath, how did you deal with everyone's pain that was coming in when you were dealing with that? And then why did you then decide to walk away from a bricks and mortar business to then do what you're doing full time?
I'm just sort of thinking, I decided to walk away from brick and mortar business because Spirit was being pretty adamant that I needed to get out. And now, looking at the world we're in right now, I am so grateful that I got the message and I started leveraging my way out when I did. So I approached tattooing from the moment I have a background in fine arts. And so I knew that tattooing could be something other than the kind of stereotypical battle boy network. And I knew that for me, I wanted to approach it as a healing art, as the idea of putting prayers on people's skin and helping truth and beauty to surface in their body. So the people who chose to work with me were people who were deliberately coming to do their work. So that meant that even though it was painful, it was about the fact that we were moving through something. So instead of it being I'm inflicting pain and causing more pain to go in, it was really about I was drawing pain that was already in there out. And there's an idea that I love, which is that sometimes when somebody, like with a wound, we heal more than what the wound is, that it activates healing within us and allows more to be healed. So I will say that doing tattooing from 1990, for a good solid 20 years, that I learned how to hold space for pain, and I learned how to sit with pain, and I learned how not to try to fix it. I learned how not to try to run away from it. I learned how not to be distressed about it, but instead to simply be, yeah, you're feeling pain. You chose this. You're paying me to do this. And to let it be okay, and I was praying earlier today for guidance about something to talk, one of the things to talk about. And I was thinking about, I really think that one of the things that happens for us as human beings is that whenever we're in a state of distress or not, happy, joy, we think something's wrong. And I actually think that sometimes it's just the human condition to be experiencing discomfort, to just be experiencing some distress. And that it doesn't mean something's wrong as much as it just means that there's a cloud in the sky or that, there's a storm passing. And the best thing we can do is love ourselves through it and allow it to be like, yep, I'm just feeling this discomfort and I love and accept myself anyway. So tattooing was one of the greatest gifts for being a highly sensitive empathic person in many ways that I could have ever received, because I had to learn how to let it be okay that people were uncomfortable without feeling responsible for making it better.
How many tattoos do you have?
I am tattooed.
You're tattooed all over.
There is a term. Mm-hmm. There is a term that sort of within the tattoo world, it's like the difference between somebody who has tattoos and a person really committed to the lifestyle is that people who have tattoos can count the number of tattoos they have, and then there are those of us who are tattooed, where it's just, you get to a point where there's so much of your body that has images on them that you really are. It's more like what percentage of your body is covered. I still have quite a bit of space. And right now my body, like I listen very strongly to guidance, and I'm not getting any guidance about rushing out and doing anything in the middle of a pandemic, And personally, I'm incredibly grateful that I heard the call to step away so that I could write the book, that I could expand my work, that I could reach a broader audience, and I could start teaching what I've been learning for the last 35 years, and breaking away from brick and mortar into virtual so that I really have the ability to be of service without having to worry about masking up and wiping down everything with, germicide between sessions and all of the things that running a brick and mortar business entails these days.
Well, we talked a little bit about your book. I want to talk about how can people get a copy of your book. But prior to that, I know you have some other amazing resources and tools for our listeners and audience members out there, our SoundBalming community. How can people reach you and claim some of the gifts that you all have to share? And how could they get a copy of the book? And if they want to work with you, what's the best way to connect with you?
So the way to get to everything is to go over to empathicmastery.com, and I can give you additional URLs, because if you want to go to get just the book, it's an empathicmasterybook.com. And for us, for an empath emergent, for basically an empath sort of Empath Safety Kit, where you start getting support and information. There's with the purchase of the book, I basically am offering a course inside of the book that is a bonus gift for everybody who goes and buys the book. So if you buy the book, you get like the big mama of support. And if you want to start getting a taste and get a feel for how I work and what I do, you can head on over to empathicsensitivity.com, and that will lead you to a really, really juicy ebook that will really get you started.
I'm telling you guys, ladies and gentlemen, damas y caballeros, go to Jennifer's site. She has some great gifts and tools and resources for you. And since many of us are quarantined, you want to learn some new stuff. You want to take a class. You want to be a part of a healing community. So Jennifer, thanks for joining me. But before you leave, my favorite part of the show is called the Super Bomb Questions. And these are questions that my listeners want to know just a little bit more about you. Are you ready?
I love this. Yes.
All right. So here we go. So I'm going to ask them quickly, and I want you to respond as quickly as possible. Okay. So here we go. What is your favorite word?
Hope.
What is your favorite quote or spiritual verse?
Oh, good Lord. I have so many, but right now it is don't give up before the miracle happens.
What's your superpower?
Holding space.
What's your spirit animal?
Bees.
What brings you to tears of joy?
Seeing humans be real and heal.
You should be able to answer this next one quickly. What brings you to tears of sorrow? You an empath.
The world?
The world. Say, you just fill in the blank. What do you wish you had more time to do?
Oh, good Lord. What do I wish I had more time to do? Right now I'm on a massive beading kick. So I guess like to bead.
To bead. What is the book or books you've given most as a gift, and why?
Oh my God, I love that question. Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, because it is the bomb, and I mean it with BALM. Oh, it is so good. It is just so good, and it really does just goes into it. It is everything she says in that book about fear and about creativity and about living a joyful life. I couldn't have said it better myself. So Big Magic, Elizabeth Gilbert. Love
Big
it.
Magic. Mm-hmm. Outside of the biological things that we all have to do in the morning, what is your morning routine like?
So getting up, taking Bob the pug out, because if we don't do that, Bob will have an accident, and wandering around in the garden and just, looking at the sky and connecting with source. And then making a big container of bulletproof coffee with homemade ghee and some protein powder and just really, and coconut powder and yada yada, and it's just amazing, and just sort of easing into my day.
Right. If you were in the Miss America talent competition, Jennifer Moore, what would your talent be?
I would sing.
You would sing. All right. Well, Jennifer, I want to thank you for joining me in the Bomb Shelter today. I had a great. You want to lead us out with a song? You got a note for us? You want to just hit a note for us or something? A do re mi fa sol la ti do?
I'm actually I'm going to sing. Okay. Hang on, let me just take a sip of water. So
go ahead, take a sip of water. Coming to the stage all the way from all the way. Put your hands together for my friend Jennifer Moore.
All will be well. All will be well. All manner of things will be well. All will be well.
Coming to a studio near you, put your hands together for the Empath, aka Jennifer Moore. Thank you for joining me in the Bomb Shelter. It has been a pleasure talking to you. I had so much fun.
LaMarr, it has been a divine appointment for sure.
I love that, divine appointment. And my daughter, this show is dedicated to my daughter, Samira Adama Nafia Shields, my empath, my joy. I also want to thank my engineer, Alexander Blanc, for making that sound great. My producer, Nicole Klempaka, for making me sound smart. My theme music by Supremacy for making me sound good. And all of you for listening. Make sure you subscribe. Stop being stingy. If you want to know more about me, go to drdrlds.com. You can get our merchandise. You can pick up a copy of my book if you want to know where I'm going to be speaking. It's all virtual because I'm not getting on a plane yet. COVID has gotten me stationary, but thank you for technology. And I always believe that something wonderful is about to happen, and that some people miss the message because they're too busy looking for the mess, but not you. Thanks for tuning in, and do something for someone other than yourself today. You've been listening to SoundBalming. Thank you, Jennifer. Peace.
Oh, peace to you. Thank you so much.